My New Norm podcast.
Hi, my name is Bill Parker. In this episode, we're talking about navigating narcissism. In my experience as a mental health counselor, I've treated both people with narcissistic personality disorders and the caregivers that oftentimes form relationships with them. We're going to talk about how that relationship serves both those people, about how those two people are often attracted to one another because of their pasts, because of their traumas, because of their histories. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to get out of that cycle and how to get out of that pattern that's held you back and kept you in unhealthy relationships for so very long.
So take a breath, lean in, and get ready. This is the My New Norm podcast.
We all have our stories of change and challenges, and it is my hope that these episodes will provide encouragement. Remember to follow, listen, and share with those you know.
Some people don't just control conversations, they control emotions, manipulate trust, twist reality, and leave people questioning themselves. In this episode, we'll confront the hard truth about narcissistic behavior. My guest, Bill Parker, mental health counselor, joins me for a powerful conversation on navigating toxic relationships, emotional confusion, control manipulation, and the hidden damage narcissism leaves behind. If you've ever felt emotionally drained, silenced, or trapped in someone else's chaos, this episode is for you. Welcome to the My New Norm podcast.
Well, I want to welcome to the episode today a close friend and a friend I've known since probably 1979 when he was in high school. And here we are today chatting about a very important subject. We're going to be talking about navigating narcissism. It's not one subject that you hear every day, but some people are living with it every day. And so I've invited Bill Parker, a mental health counselor. It'll be a conversation that you want to hear. Well, welcome, Bill.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Barry.
I tell you, I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to get into this subject, but before we do, give the listener a little taste of who Bill Parker was growing up.
Gosh, all I ever cared about growing up was church and surfing. That was it. After high school, I was a youth pastor at a church that you are very familiar with, Pastor Rick Howard, and I served there for a couple of years before I went to Oral Roberts University and finished up my schooling. After that, I went to law school at Regent University. I practiced law for about 20 years. It was a great fit for me. I think my gifting is highly pastoral. After a time of real reflection and trying to figure out what I wanted to do that was going to be the last half of my life, working as I ran operations at a sea turtle hospital in Juno Beach.
Wow.
And while I was there is where I realized that I really should be helping people. Sea turtles are great.
Those are the big ones, right?
Yeah, in fact, right now is leatherback season, nesting on our beaches here in Juneau. We'll have these could weigh up to 2,000 pounds.
Oh.
They're about the size of a Volkswagen.
Oh my.
And they come up on the beach and do their thing, and they don't care who sees them. They don't scare. They're just the most amazing creatures. And if you ever get a chance to see one, it's you'll never forget it.
So this is out in Florida, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
What beach would they have to go to?
Most of the beaches in Central Florida have them, but these right here in Juno Beach is probably some of the most densely nested areas in Florida, certainly for the leatherback. And in fact, we get all year, all summer long, we have green sea turtles, loggerhead sea turtles, and leatherbacks. And probably a total of somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 nests a year on the 9 miles.
Oh, wow.
A lot of activity.
Wow.
Times in the summer, you can go down at night, certainly see nesting sea turtles at night. And if you're really lucky, you get to see some of the babies coming up on their way out.
Oh my. So it was there that you decided to shift and pursue what you're doing now. Is that right?
That's right. I went to Palm Beach Atlantic at night and got my master's in counseling and then started my practice shortly after that.
And your practice is called?
Experience Matters Counseling.
Well, Bill, let's get into it. What are we talking about today?
In my practice, I see a lot of victims isn't the right word, but people that are in relationships with narcissistic people. Sometimes their narcissism rises to the level of being clinically diagnosable as a personality disorder. Narcissism really has kind of confused a lot of people. I get a lot of people that come into my office and they're accusing everybody of being a narcissist. We're all a little narcissistic. Like our experiences ourselves, we all learn about ourselves, but when it becomes clinically relevant, you'll see not just selfish, grandiose behaviors preoccupied with success or how they appear to others. You'll also see they just require excessive admiration from everyone around them. They have a sense of entitlement. They think that they are the center of attention, they should be, and the world's better off because of that. They're interpersonally exploitive of others. One of the ones that has more clinical relevance, and that's a complete lack of empathy, unable to sense or respond or react to the emotions of others. They just don't even acknowledge them as a general rule.
What are some personalities that we see every day in media that would reflect that? Just to give us an idea.
Politicians is for people with personality disorders that aren't pretty. The rest in Hollywood.
Oh my. My.
Like there are certain vocations where extremely high levels narcissism just because of the competitiveness. When it's clinically relevant, one of the things you'll see that's really important to see is that they have a complete lack of insight into their own behavior. Like you and I, when we're navigating our days, we're always self-correcting based on our environment, right? We walk into a home and everybody's happy. We're gonna jump right in and experience that same happiness with them. Somebody's grieving, we'll do the same thing. We'll jump right in and we'll immediately adjust to what's going on around us. People with personality disorders, they don't do that. They lack the ability to self-correct. Back to the community around them, they are thriving the community around them always because of their deep insecurity and fear. That's the only way they stay safe is by controlling the environment around them.
Oh my. What would be a good definition of one that is narcissistic?
Well, the traits that I just read to you are, basically, those are traits that you find in the DSM, right? There's 9 traits listed there. And if you have 5 of those traits, you're diagnosable as having a personality disorder. But really, in practice, I look for those 2 things. I look for a lack of empathy and a lack of insight. If somebody what makes it a personality disorder is that these patterns are part of who they are. That's what makes it a personality disorder. It's who they are. It's how they identify. It's not just something that they do to cope. And those 2 things together, for most people, if somebody is exploitive of others and doesn't have the ability to have any empathy about how they're impacting the world around them and the people that they live with, for sure, it makes it very, very almost impossible to have a healthy relationship with that kind of a person.
Oh my. So when you have a personality as strong as this, who are the people around them that they want to be with?
Oh, such a great question, Barry. And this is why I mentioned earlier, they can't really call them victims because, yes, they're in this relationship where they're being emotionally abused, right? But a lot of them come from places where that feels normal to them, feels comfortable to them. That is what they know. And I put these people in generally in a category of caretakers. They're not really victims. They're more caretakers, and they have that caretaker role. For example, in their family of origin, they um, lost their ability to even connect with themselves about what they want because they grew up in a home where it didn't matter what they wanted, where everything that they did was going to be punished for the unexplainable reasons. And narcissists will do that. They're always trying to make sure there's no solid ground underneath anybody around them, because that's how they stay in control. And so if you're raised by somebody that has a narcissistic or borderline personality disorder, that ground is never going to be, you're never going to have a voice. Eventually, you're going to grow up in a home where you have no voice, and you find that the only way to survive that home is to adopt the voice of others, meet
Wow.
the needs of others, always reacting to the community around you. Eventually, you lose the ability and the connection to self. You don't really understand how you feel. You don't know what you think. You lose your ability to have an opinion because having an opinion was punished right out of you.
Mhm.
And then these people become the caretakers of other narcissists because they're getting what they've learned to survive in that environment of emotional abuse or around selfish other people or constantly serving the needs of somebody else who has great need. And then as they become adults, they enter into those relationships,
Right.
and that thing just continues to perpetuate.
So as a child in that environment, that's their norm.
Right.
So they're looking for a mate that would emulate that controlling personality that they would be under. Is that right?
They move from the role of a victim to they actually begin to need that person because that's how they
Ah,
I say it all the time that the narcissist and the caretaker will always find each other. Healthy people do not want to be around narcissists. There's a revulsion to being around them. They're always pulling and taking. They're especially with narcissistic personalities, they're always pulling in, they're collecting people, or they're discarding them when they're no longer of use. There's no neutral with them.
mhm.
And healthy people live in that neutral place. Like
They resist.
right. And they just
Yeah.
know think about it. So they
Yeah.
they stay away. But a caretaker, they just swoop right into that role. I always say it that the narcissist and the caretaker will always find each other. Energetically, they will always find each other because they both need each other. The caretaker needs the narcissist as much as the narcissist needs the caretaker.
Go ahead and maybe you have, but help us out with that word you're using, caretaker.
Well, let's talk about how they become caretakers, right? There's a belief that's learned in their family of origin, a belief about themselves. I'm only valuable, or I'm only worthy when I'm useful to others.
Mm.
My desires don't really matter to anybody, or they're going to be punished right out of me. So to speak up or have a voice becomes not important. You're only safest when you're silent and invisible. The only time your voice is needed is to validate others, not yourself.
Ooh.
Then you grow up in an environment, and then you no longer feel safe having an opinion. You no longer feel safe having a voice. You no longer feel safe having a no.
Wow.
And that's exactly what a narcissist looks for. I can ask or just run through that will allow people to at least think through in their own mind what it takes, the way that a caretaker thinks in their head. Essentially, it's a caretaker quiz to decide if you are a caretaker or not.
Okay.
Some of these, I'm not going to go through the whole quiz, but You often don't know what you want. You frequently find yourself angry or upset after talking to your partner, and you don't know why. Even after telling your partner no, you still find that you do what he or she wants. You've learned to act as if you're okay, even when you're not. You find that you say things very carefully to your partner, otherwise he or she will get upset or angry. You cover up or you excuse your partner's rude or harmful or obnoxious behaviors and comments. You know you can make your partner feel act better or kinder if you would just do what they want. Happy, you're happy.
So there's such a focus on the caregiver's attention to the other person. Like you said, it's like, I'm going to adapt as we go just to keep he or her from being out of control.
And that idea that you're needed for that is your value.
Oh, wow.
You're needed by that person, that person can't get along without you. That becomes your value, your basis of your own value in yourself. And even that emotional volatility of those relationships becomes your draw.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a caretaker, that becomes the thing that makes you feel secure. Because this person's pulling me all the time. He's pulling or pushing me all the time. Neutral, like being in a healthy relationship where there's neutrality, that doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Once a caretaker has lost their voice, they begin to be very insecure about having a voice. Like they don't want to have an opinion because they're going to be wrong or they might be wrong. So they'd rather not have one.
Right.
And believe me, the narcissist doesn't ever want to know their opinion. People with that personality disorder, either a narcissistic personality or borderline personality disorder, they live in such deep fear of abandonment, fear of being seen, fear of not being acknowledged, fear of being discovered as not special. That's their greatest fear. And so when they have a person in their life, a caretaker, that they have to constantly keep that caretaker in constant chaos and turmoil for them to be secure. That's the only way, is they have that emotional control over others.
So give us an idea, Bill, in regards to those that you have had deep conversations with, in regards to providing a ray of hope and a path of health.
It's my favorite part. Because sometimes the light just goes on for them, right? Sometimes they walk into the office and they know that they've seen the dynamic and they've had enough. They may not understand it, but they see it and they've had enough. All they know is that they don't want to be part of that anymore.
Right.
But sometimes they come, and a lot of times, I get this a lot, because the narcissist will always accuse the caretaker of being the narcissist. So frequently. And they'll come in and they'll say, I don't know. I might be it. I don't know. They're confused. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they think. They don't have their own sense of identity. It's been long gone. That response, which is just caves into their abuser, just gives in constantly. That's becomes their coping style. But again, the thing that it does for them, because of the home that they grew up in, usually, is that they never have to have an opinion. Because if I have an opinion, I could be wrong. So I'd rather not have one.
Right.
And that's not, like, a healthy person would not be attracted to that person, even the caregiver. This is an interesting story. I had a client that come to me, and she could not make a sentence without following it up with some type of criticism of herself. So she would say, so, like, even beginning, I'd say, how are you doing? She said, I'm doing pretty well. But then she'd say, but that's just probably me being in denial. She get through a statement without following it up with another statement. It was like an inner voice of criticism. And it happened literally sentence by sentence by sentence by sentence. She couldn't make a sentence, she couldn't make a statement without following it up with something that reflected her either loss of self or hatred of self, or it was like this inner voice that just kept following her everywhere she went. We probably had 5 or 6 sessions and we talked about that inner voice. And my take on it was, hey, why don't we learn how to call that out? Why don't we learn how to hate that voice? And so she started just saying, she would start to hear it and then she would move past it. 2 or 3 weeks later, she started getting better. And then maybe the 3rd or 4th session, she came back and that inner voice was stronger than ever. So we started talking, we just made a shift. There's a technique called internal family systems where we start looking at all of our different parts and what they do for us. And what we talked about was, what is that criticism doing for you? Like, why do you need that voice so badly? Because you keep pulling it back. Why do you need it? What is it doing for you? And as we started to investigate that, it's like this light went on for her. She just said, well, I don't ever have to be wrong. I don't ever have to make a mistake. I don't ever have to do anything. I don't ever have to do anything because I'm always reacting to that inner voice that says I'm not able. And so once you realize that maybe in her family of origin that was helpful, that actually helped her get through the day, but she didn't need it now. She needed it then, but she doesn't need it now. Then that was really the beginning of her healing, is that insight into why she wasn't able to express her own voice or opinions. Or finally, I remember the day she actually quit me by text. Said, I don't think I need you anymore. I think I'm doing great. And
wow, that was good.
Yeah.
That was good. I have seen people after they're emotionally broken, when they start getting help, there's a reaction where they go opposite, become angry and act out, and where they didn't have a voice or suppressed, it's like the opposite comes out. I see that. Is that true, or is that part of the process?
That is absolutely part of the process of healing, and I teach it that way because it's really like a pendulum, right?
Yeah.
You go from this extreme on this end of the pendulum, which is you have no voice. When you start thinking about saying no to somebody, right? The pendulum start to come back and you start thinking that you're going to say no. You're filled with anxiety about saying no.
Yeah.
So you've got all this anxiety that moves the pendulum all the way over here. So it comes out harsh. It comes out mean and nasty. And I tell every client that I'm working with that's going through that process, it doesn't matter if it's mean and nasty, because eventually the pendulum's going to fall in the middle. But don't beat yourself up for being mean and nasty. At least you have a no.
Right.
Better to have a no that's mean and nasty than to not have a no.
Right.
And so the pendulum goes from one to over here, and then eventually that pendulum does come into the middle when they find their voice and they find that they're able to say no without the anxiety around having an opinion and saying a no. I had a client that grew up in a home that was incredibly abusive. His mother was a drug addict and had borderline personality disorder. His father was a soldier and incredibly abusive and rigid. He had no. So every time he came into my office, I would ask him things like, hey, before session today, would you mind running down to the corner drugstore and getting me a pack of gum? And the first time I did that question filled him with panic. Like he wanted to say no, but the idea of telling me no was horrible for him. And so we talked about it. And every session after that, he would walk in the door and I'd say, hey, would you mind changing the oil in my car tomorrow if you got time? And he would just practice. And he got to the point where he would laugh, but he learned how to say no. As soon as that anxiety left, and then he found that he was able to say no in other parts of his life. And,
wow.
And it's so much of what we don't do that's healthy is because we are so anxious about doing it wrong and getting in trouble for it.
Yeah.
We are much like little kids just trying to stay safe.
You know, it's funny you even mentioned little kids as you were talking about the swing. Uh, it's like a toddler that begins to find that he can say no,
Mm.
or he doesn't want to do something, or that's mine. He begins to voice that, and that's why we call it the terrible twos or threes. It's like it's actually a healthy thing because they're learning about themselves. And this is very similar in counseling then.
I love that. I never even looked at it through that lens. That's perfect. It's exactly how it happens.
In fact, I had heard that a toddler's process is very, very similar to the teenage years.
Mm.
Those two times in your life, you're having a burst of being very vocal about what you want. Toddlers and teenagers.
Boy, doesn't it make it, it shows what I see as this huge parent responsibility you have not to punish the no.
Guide
Like,
it.
guide it, dive in with it, talk about it. But we don't as parents. I know I did. I punished the no.
Yeah. Bill, what can you say to someone listening right now and they've just realized that they're right in the middle of this content and they're feeling like, oh my, what can I do? What would you say?
I'd say start consuming material to help you understand that dynamic. There's a great book that I recommend to every client. It's called Stop Caretaking the Narcissist and Borderline and Get On With Your Life.
That's a great title.
A excellent book. And almost every client that I work with that's in that caretaker role gets a look at that book. But they eventually they'll get through that book if they stay in therapy, because that's what we do when we do that work. But helping them, most important thing is helping them find their voice.
Yeah.
Helping them recognize the anxiety that they feel when they're in a position to have a choice. They have so much about it that they just go silent. There's a clinical term called fawning, where a person will, in response to a narcissistic person or somebody who's trying to override their will or take away their choice, which goes back to verbal abuse when you're young, and they fawn role, which means I deny everything that I'm thinking and I'm feeling, and I just cave and I serve the person that's wanting me to do or say something other than what I think and feel myself, because that's the only way to stay safe.
Wow.
And so once they begin that fawning role, that begins to take over all of their life, and that's how they lose their voice. When we start, or at least when I start to teach that and help them to understand that it was important to not have a voice in the home that you grew up in. It was not safe. It was dangerous for you then. But then is not now. Doesn't matter what happens now. Even in a home with another narcissist, even if you're married to a narcissist, are you going to be okay? Yeah, I'll be okay. It may end the relationship when you start setting boundaries and when you start standing up for yourself and having a voice. But you're not the victim that you were when you were 3 or 4 or 5 or 7. And this is not that. You're safe now. You have a voice. Start using your voice.
Right.
Because a lot of times people just go from caretaker role to caretaker role to caretaker role. I've talked about it before, where a lot of times people will come into our churches after leaving an abusive marriage. And what do we do with the person that has no? We put them on parking. We put them in coffee. We put them serving at the door. We ask them to do, and they don't have a no. They say yes to everything. And yet we're perpetuating this idea that we're taking advantage of the fact that they don't have a no. We don't even know that they don't have a no. We just love that they're willing to serve. And yet we're priming them for their next narcissistic relationship.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer to that is. You know, there should be more mentorship, I think, in churches on this topic. We should be watching out for those people that are leaving those abusive marriages and not just putting them on every volunteer duty that we can come up with because they're available.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding that when somebody doesn't have a voice and they've lost their no, and we're not addressing it, all we're doing is we're just a placeholder for the next narcissistic relationship they're going to end up in. Sometimes caretakers are very narcissistic themselves because that's what drives that process. I never want to be wrong, so I'm just not going to have a voice. And then when they put them in positions of control, sometimes the tables flip because all they've ever known is that either the narcissist or the caretaker role. That's the dynamic they've ever known. So yeah.
You had mentioned that we need to be careful, maybe more mentored to see the things that people are going through and not necessarily purposely supporting a wrong action. They can become, in their willingness to help people, they can probably go two ways. Correct me if I'm wrong. Passive aggressive or burned out, just completely flat out burned out, nothing left to give. And even in leadership, we need to know those signs that we're seeing because they're going to be burned out and gone, either because of passive aggressiveness showing up in relationships or in burnout.
There is no replacement for deep, interpersonal, trusting, covenant relationship. There just isn't. We can't bring all these people into our church buildings and not develop an environment where those personal relationships are fostered and cultivated and grown, because it's only in deep, vulnerable relationships with others are we able to see some of those patterns that we've had that are unhealthy. Church can be a little impersonal sometimes.
What website would you give them to learn a little bit more about you and what you do, and maybe some of the resources that they'll find there?
At experiencematterscounseling.com, there's some resources there. There's some articles there, book list or a reading list that lists some of my books that I recommend to my clients.
Okay.
Most important thing is to get good help. Sometimes when you're in those relationships and you've been in that environment for a long time, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
You've been caught in that cycle of always reacting to the needs of others, of somebody else who's constantly changing from accusing and rescuing and acting like they're the victim, and you're always reacting to them.
Mm-hmm.
That you get lost. You're lost. And they come to me and you can see it on their face. They're just broken. Helping that person put their life back together, helping that person find their voice, helping that person see how their childhood is impacting their relationship choices today and change that pattern is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It's happened in my own life. When God is working through a person, when somebody walks down this road with Jesus, Jesus heals them, heals their mind, heals their soul, heals their body, and heals their heart. That's what he does. Boundaries is probably the most important thing that I teach in so many different settings. I very simply say what you feel, say what you saw and heard that made you feel that way, and then say what you want. And that's how you set a boundary. You never explain a boundary, but a boundary has to be defined, has to be easily understood. In other words, a boundary isn't stop making me mad. The boundary is don't call me names anymore. Stop doing that. That's not okay. Don't raise your voice. Don't raise your voice with me ever. It's not okay. Can we talk about that? Those are boundaries.
Yeah.
We're always safe. If we don't know where to put the boundaries are, We're always safe putting the boundaries around disrespect. That is the one place you can't go wrong. And you never have to explain those boundaries. And yet, when you start trying to set boundaries with somebody with a personality disorder that does not like boundaries, they will punish you for doing it. Get ready. They will punish you for it because they don't want boundaries. They don't want you setting boundaries. They don't want you calling them out, even in the lightest of ways. And they will punish you for it. And doesn't matter what happens in this relationship going forward, but you will always be the villain. That narcissistic person will always make you the villain in that relationship. So as you start to navigate this and start getting healthier, those are the two things you have to be ready to do. You have to be willing and ready to set boundaries. And oftentimes the boundaries will end the relationship, but not always. But they often do. And then you will always be the victim. People with personality disorders, they do not think like everyone else thinks. And yet, in fact, this is kind of funny. Every client that I've dealt with in this area, they're always saying things like, I don't know why he does that. I wish he wouldn't do that. And I don't know why he acts like that. And every time I hear that, I think to myself, it's oftentimes said out loud, that is really cute. That is really cute that you think that they're going to be normal and operate in this world of norms where they respect the feelings and thoughts of others.
Yeah.
They just aren't going to ever do that. But when people let go of that expectation, that's a big step towards them getting healthier. When they let go of that, I wish they weren't like that. Why are they like that? When they let go of all that and just accept that that's what they are, they're going to get better. It's like I really struggle with people with personality disorders. They're horribly abusive. And sometimes I want to discard them as much as everyone else does because of all the pain and all the hurt and all the devastation they are causing in so many people's lives. But one of the things that I'm learning is that I am not the decider. God is the decider. And God has hope for everybody. In Ezekiel 36:25-27, he says, then I will sprinkle water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone that's out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. We are not the decider. God is the decider. And we're called to love those people, no matter what they've done, even horrible things, because God is the decider. I am not the decider.
Wow. Well said. Well, Bill, you have shared some incredible things about navigating narcissism. It's a big, big subject, and we have been able to cover a lot of information in a short amount of time. Take a look at the website with Bill Parker, experiencematterscounseling.com. Find out. You can even get with Bill. He does a lot of Zoom therapy. And so it doesn't matter where you live. He's just a screen away. Bill, I want to thank you for coming on and being a great friend. Run hard and run long. We'll talk again.
Thank you, Barry.